Hey, John Corcoran here at RetailX in Chicago, and I'm speaking with Franz Jordan, who's the founder and CEO of Sellics. And Franz, tell me a little bit about what Sellics does, and I'm going to dive in a little bit into your backstory.
Sure. So Sellics is a software that helps brands to manage and grow their business on Amazon. So we started as an Amazon SEO software. So essentially that means a software that helps brands to increase the rankings of their products on Amazon for relevant keywords. And we expanded since then and evolved into what we call an all-in-one solution. So today we offer all the things that you need to manage and run your business on Amazon out of one suite.
Got it. And your background was in consulting, I believe, software consulting previously. We were talking beforehand, and you said that you had a friend who came to you with wanting advice on how to rank for keywords, right?
Exactly. So I had another software company before that was focused on data analytics, and so a friend of mine was selling on Amazon back then. That was in 2013, early 2014, and so he reached out to me asking whether we could build him a software that helps him to track his rankings on Amazon, because he was doing this manually. So he had this list of 50 keywords that he was checking every day to see how his product ranks for those keywords, and so we started to build this software, and then we did some research, and we saw that there is really a gap in the market, and so we decided to release it as a public software.
Yeah. It's an interesting perspective, because a lot of the companies that are here at the show, especially software companies, started as sellers, and then they figured out some kind of software algorithm they were using for themselves and then started selling it to others. But you have that outsider's perspective. Obviously, it's done well. You have over 100 employees working for you now. Do you think that outsider's perspective helped you as you were developing Sellics?
I think it was not necessarily a disadvantage, right? So obviously the advantage is that if you're a seller yourself, then you know your own problems. The advantage of not being an outsider is you need to do a more thorough research. So you don't just think about your own problems, but essentially what we did at the beginning, we made close to 200 interviews with sellers to really understand the problems that they have, and so you get an understanding of what's the problem of a smaller seller, what's the problem of a larger seller, what's the problem of a reseller compared to a brand, and so you do a more systematic and thorough research, and I think you're not just focused on your own problems, but you have a broader view. So I think it's certainly been helpful in that sense. Personally, I think it is. If I were a seller, I'd have some problems to share all my data with another seller that happens to have a software. So I think that there is no conflict of interest on our side, because we're not a seller, we're just software provider, and the data that we deal with is very sensitive. We have access to profit and margin data, and so it's very sensitive data. And so I think that this is something that is appreciated by the market. And I know a few clients that say, well, I was specifically looking for a solution where there's no seller behind who might use the data to for his own purposes.
That's a great point. And the product has evolved quite a bit, just in a couple years' time. So you started as a search research tool, and you evolved. And tell us about the different areas that you're in now.
Right, so we started with Amazon SEO, now we do Amazon advertising, automation of advertising, we have profit analytics, we have inventory management, product review management, competitive insight, product research. So literally the goal is really to provide everything that you need to get started on Amazon and to grow your business on Amazon out of one solution. So we only focus on Amazon, but within Amazon we cover all the use cases that are relevant.
It's a bootstrapped company. You have 100 employees now. What has been like leading such a fast-growing company, overseeing that many people, expanding internationally? What has been like for you personally as a leader?
That's a very interesting question. I think the main theme for me has been to constantly grow myself and constantly adapt, and having a very clear understanding that what has worked and my style of the way that I did it last year is probably not the right thing to do it this year. So it's certainly the way I look at it is that every year is like a new job for me. In the first 3 to 4 months, like a learning period for me to learn my job for this year, and then execute in the remaining months, right? But it's a lot of I think I do a ton of research. I talk a lot to entrepreneurs that are already further ahead than I am, and I try to. I put a lot of effort into growing the company and growing with the company.
Do you have mentors or business partners or peer groups or coaches or anything like that who's helped guide you as you've had to evolve yourself and as you have had to grow as a leader?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it's not been the same person for the entire time, but depending on the stage and depending on the problem, there's certainly a network. So I'm headquartered in Berlin, Germany, and there's a big entrepreneurial scene, and so you can have access to people that have grown companies to thousands of employees and so on. So it is the right environment, and I think it is. It just makes the entire experience smoother, right? It's not perfect. It's not flawless, right? It's certainly it's interesting. Sometimes you get recommendations. People will tell you, look, this is what's going to happen, and you don't believe that this is going to happen, and so then you need to make the mistake for yourself, and then you learn. And you say, oh, damn it, he was right. But generally speaking, you get a lot of learnings, and you implement those faster.
So you've been bootstrapped, but we were talking beforehand, you said you recently made the decision to raise funding. What changed?
I mean, I think the ambition and the opportunity just grew. So I think when we started, we had a very strong focus on Amazon sellers, which tend to be small and mid-size companies. And so now we decided to also expand into the enterprise segment. So today we have customers such as Lego, Unilever, some of the very big consumer brands. And so we decided that in order to really go after this opportunity, it's probably a good idea to raise some capital. So we're currently closing a funding round. It's not crazy amounts, right? It's not going to be $100 million in funding or so, because I think this bootstrap mentality is very important and is a core part of our culture. So I certainly want to keep large aspects of it, and so I don't want to overcapitalize the company from going to nothing to way too much.
Right. I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs who say that process of going out and raising money forces you to get better at understanding your own company, explaining it, articulating it. Tell me a little bit about what that process has been like going around and pitching your company to investors for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, so I haven't done this in a while, so it was really a new situation, a new learning again. I think that initially I was maybe a bit overconfident in the own story that we had, because I felt that bootstrapping a company to a few $1 million in revenue and strong growth and strong market is probably enough to tell the story. But I realized quickly that that's not the case, right? I mean, you talk to people that are certainly smart, but they not necessarily know about your specific market and the competitive landscape. So it's a lot about simplifying the story and rephrasing it in a way that even outsiders understand it very, very quickly and find it attractive. And so that's one thing I learned. And the other thing I learned is that specifically in the venture capitalist scene, people are obviously interested in a big vision behind, right? So it's one part is what's the company doing today and how has it developed, but I think just as important is where is it going to be in 5 years, where is it going to be in 10 years from now, and why is it going to be a very big company? And so that's also something that as a bootstrap founder, you don't spend a lot of time thinking about what's going to happen in 10 years, right? Because you have so many operational things to do. You're always short on resources, essentially, so you're caught up in the day-to-day operations, and so that's been a very healthy process. It certainly also helped to become a bit more professional in some ways. Some processes just need to be documented, the entire finance part and tech security and all these kind of things. I mean, there are just things that need to be improved as part of such a process. And I think even though it's a bit distracting, it's certainly healthy. Right. Gets the company to a better stage.
Right. So tell me a little bit about some of the clients that you work with, sellers on Amazon, big brands on Amazon. What are some of the changes that are happening today that they're having to adapt to?
So I think fundamentally the biggest change is that they realize that Amazon is becoming more and more relevant. So 5 years ago, maybe a big brand made something like less than 5% of their total revenue on Amazon, and so now suddenly it gets to 20-30%, right? So this one channel Amazon is becoming very important for those brands. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is they realize that this channel is getting a lot more complex than it used to be in the past. So I think that Amazon historically has been a sales and distribution channel where you upload your products and then you just sell them. And what happened over the past 2 or 3 years is that Amazon essentially evolved into a marketing platform where you have very complex marketing opportunities and mechanisms. I mean, essentially you have like an AdWords inside of Amazon, right? And so I think that those developments, the increased relevancy and also the increased complexity is certainly something where a lot of specifically the larger companies are struggling with to make the decision to put enough resources behind this, right? So it's typically a small team, maybe one person doing this part-time and playing around a little bit with Amazon. But if you make hundreds of millions in revenue on Amazon, you should have a team that does this. Yeah?
What are some of the changes that are coming down the pike that you see happening that are going to be affecting these larger brands, smaller sellers as well? What are going to be affecting them, particularly with regard to Amazon?
So I think the trend that we've seen over the past 2-3 years is that obviously Amazon as a whole got a lot more competitive because it is such a powerful channel where the overall revenue, and it's still growing, you probably know the numbers, right? It's growing by something like $50 billion in revenue or so last year alone, right? So you have this massive growth, and this is obviously attracting a lot of people because there's a lot of money to be made. And what happened at the same time is that Amazon constantly reduced the barriers of entry because you don't need to have your own shop. You don't need a payment software. You don't need a warehouse because Amazon even offers you, fulfillment by Amazon, so you can store your products at an Amazon warehouse. So essentially, you and I today we could start selling on Amazon, and then probably in a couple of weeks from now we'd be up and running, right? So it's been getting very easy to get started, and that obviously leads to a lot of competition.
More competition because of it.
Exactly. That's exactly right. So you have more competition. And so currently, I think it's a very competitive situation on Amazon, and I don't think that's going to change, right? I think that today competition is primarily from volume because there are many competitors, and I think what will change over the next years is that competition will be a lot more intense, not just in terms of volume, but in terms of skills, right? People overall across the board will be a lot more educated. Today, there are still a lot of sellers and vendors that are very successful that don't necessarily have a high understanding of how the things work on Amazon. But I think that this is going to change, and you will just need to be an expert with Amazon.
We're talking to Franz Jordan from Sellics. Franz, where can people learn more about you?
So here at RetailX, where obviously we have a booth, right? So feel free to visit us at the booth, and otherwise just on our website, sellics.com. Feel free to check it out.
Excellent. Pleasure talking to you, and we'll be doing more interviews here at RetailX over the next few days.